President Trump addressed the UN General Assembly on Tuesday. Per usual, it was like the tedious laundry list of bragging and lies and grievances, and then just like a dose of bizarre bullshit. There was a sprinkling of kind of notable newsworthy stuff. Here's a flavor of what Ben and I were forced to endure so that you don't have to watch the full thing. Here's a clip.
I ended 7 wars, dealt with the leaders of each and every one of these countries, and never even received a phone call from the United Nations offering to help in finalizing the deal. All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle, and then a teleprompter that didn't work. What is the purpose of the United Nations? For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. I've also been working relentlessly, stopping the killing in Ukraine. China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products. Think of it. They're funding the war against themselves. Who the hell ever heard of that one? Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. Immigration and the high cost of so-called green renewable energy is destroying a large part of the free world and a large part of our planet.
Okay, so just a little summary, and I'll add some more stuff he said. He blames the UN for not attending peace talks that I would bet money they weren't invited to and actually didn't end the conflicts Trump is referencing in the first place. His position on Gaza and the creation of a Palestinian state is basically where Biden was in like October of 2023. So that's great, Ben. Trump says he learned only 2 weeks ago that Europe is still buying Russian oil and gas, which is kind of crazy if true, because this is not a secret. In fact, it's been quite controversial. As you heard there, he's blaming the UN for migration. Not the real answer, which is people are escaping wars or economic deprivation. He mocked anyone who cares about global warming. He said the concept of your carbon footprint is a hoax made up by evil people. So, Ben, I got to say, man, like I found watching this speech unbelievably depressing because it reminded me of all like the big picture long-term challenges like climate change that is there's not even part of the U.S. political debate anymore because we're focused on like the outrage of the day, the suppression of free speech, the crackdown on anyone who is in the Democratic Party. But I don't know, man, what'd you make of this monstrosity, and any like kind of newsworthy events from today jump out at you?
No, I mean, and actually that kind of speaks to the fecklessness of Trump's foreign policy, right? I mean, I will say I wrote 8 of these, which I joked to you before, Tommy, that I don't take a ton of pride in that. I'm probably the only human being who wrote 8 American President UNGA speeches. It's kind of like, for those of you who watch Bull Durham, I used to say it was like Crash Davis, the Kevin Costner character, breaking the minor league home run record. It's like a kind of record that just nobody else cares about. But I make the point that because I remember the tremendous care you put into, not offending people and trying to appeal to different audiences and try to build support for U.S. leadership. And you'd always launch like several initiatives, in a UN General Assembly speech. You'd try to come with real proposals for ending wars. And none of that was in this speech. And I do think if you take the long-term takeaways from the speech, one is that this is utterly embarrassing for the United States. It's not just that it's like a chuckle. He said he ended 7 wars. I don't think he could list what those 7 wars are. Nobody knows what he's talking about.
I'm going to try to explain that in a second, but please keep going.
Okay, well, because the funny thing is he accuses the UN of only issuing statements and then not solving problems. Well, says he's trying to end the war in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Stop the killing.
Exactly.
The killing's gotten worse.
Right.
He's talking about projection. Like he's the one who just demands that the war in Ukraine ends and it doesn't, right? So he appears feckless. Like you, I found the climate change piece incredibly depressing because we are so focused on these things. We may look back on this time as one of, hastening ecological disaster. And I do think the world really, in the first Trump term, it was like, let's try to keep Paris together. Let's try to keep alliances together of other countries, and U.S. states can be a part of that. This is all now breaking down. And so I think the challenge for the kind of climate community is to figure out different ways of building support inside countries for clean energy transitions, different coalitions, just kind of coming together at Climate Week at the UN or at COP, the annual summits. That's just not nearly enough. So I think this is kind of hopefully kind of rock bottom. And like a lot of other things, people have to figure out a different way to kind of push up from rock bottom, from the climate paradigm that has like dominated the globe's approach to this for the last 20 years. It's something we should kind of continue to come back to on this pod. And then lastly, I think his kind of complete, insulting of the UN is worth pausing on because, like, first of all, to defend the UN, well, the UN doesn't, quote unquote, work because the member states don't make it work. I mean, the UN doesn't have an army. The UN doesn't have, if the UN Security Council, if the United States, Russia, and China don't agree on anything, well, then you can't pass a Security Council resolution and have a plan to end a conflict, right? If the U.S. is like pulling out all of its funding for the UN, is leaving all these bodies, and all these other nationalists are kind of turning against multilateralism, well, of course, it's not the fault of like the Secretary General of the United Nations. So, it's like blaming the building of Congress for why Congress is dysfunctional. It's
right,
it's the people inside of it. But I think we have to take seriously the fact that this paradigm also doesn't work. And there's going to, at some point, have to be, and it's probably not going to be while Trump's president, or maybe other countries will start to do without us, a reconsideration about how this machinery of the international community works. I mean, at this rate, Tommy, like, I don't know if the U.S. is going to be allowed to host the United Nations by the end of Trump's presidency. So insulting,
I know. I've been thinking about that, too. It's like at some point when the systems are just, they aren't working and they haven't worked and they haven't solved a problem in years, like, at what point do you just start over and try something new? But Ben, like you, this claim that he is now making as part of his stump speech that he has ended 7 wars has been driving me completely crazy, in part because I didn't even know what he was talking about. So I tried to like dig into it and figure out like what he's saying he solved and then just fact check it a little bit. So the first one he's claiming to have solved is Israel and Iran. And I think we all remember that the Trump administration did nothing to prevent Israel from bombing Iran for 12 days. Then we started bombing Iran. And yes, Trump pressured them to cut a ceasefire deal, but I don't think you get a Nobel Peace Prize for hitting pause on a war you were part of, and the conflict's far from over. The second is Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But on Monday, the president of the DRC said that the Trump-mediated peace deal has not stopped or even calmed the fighting, and the M23, which is the key rebel group in the conflict, was not a party to the agreement. So this is just total bullshit. The third is Thailand and Cambodia. Pressure from Trump might have gotten them to come together for a fragile ceasefire, but the underlying causes of that conflict are not resolved. And there was fighting between the Thai military and Cambodian villagers just last week. The fourth is India and Pakistan, which we've talked about a bunch in this show. Remember, the Indian government says Trump played no role in brokering that ceasefire, and the two countries remain mortal enemies. So again, problem not solved. The fifth one is really weird, Ben. He says it's about Egypt and Ethiopia. But like there was never a military conflict. Like there's a diplomatic dispute over a hydroelectric dam that is a very big deal, but is still totally unresolved. So I just don't know what he's talking about there. Similarly, the sixth one is Kosovo and Serbia. Apparently that's a reference to some economic deal that the two countries signed back in 2020, but it's not a peace agreement. And finally, the seventh is Armenia and Azerbaijan. The two leaders of those countries visited the White House in August, but they didn't sign a peace deal. They signed like a commitment to try to reach a peace deal. And big picture, as we've discussed on the show, this happened because Azerbaijan routed Armenia in the war, and they're still occupying parts of Armenian territory. So this was, again, not like a conflict that he ended. It was a war where one side beat the shit out of the other. So there it is. 7 wars.
So he ended none. I mean, that's a very useful summary you have. I mean, literally, the only war that he ended is one that he started with Iran. And you don't get credit if you bomb a country and then stop bombing them and saying, I ended the war, right? Every other one of those conflicts was either not a war, did not resolve, some of them are just still ongoing, and all of them still have the border dispute is not resolved, so it's important to fact check this though, because he repeats it so much, and that all of his people just believe he ended 7 wars.
Right.
If you're a Fox News viewer, you just believe this.
It's an
and
article
often
of
it's so ridiculous that Democrats don't take it up. Journalists are exhausted, but he repeats this so much that and we should be clear, nobody around the world believes this either.
No.
And if anything, they have jokes about him saying that he ended the war between Azerbaijan and Albania, when he was in the UK. I mean, this is an absurd degree of vanity and narcissism, and I think what's scary about it is I think he believes he ended 7 wars.
I do too.
The
list is growing, and he's going back in time. He's like, I'm going to get that 2020 thing we did with Kosovo, and I'll add that to my tally. Like,
which was literally just an economic. Kosovo and Serbia have not been at war, since the late 90s. They have a kind of a frozen kind of conflict in the sense that obviously Serbia doesn't kind of recognize Kosovo's independence, but even that deal didn't resolve any of the underlying political questions. It was just like some weird trade deal that Rick Grinnell, probably profited off of, right? So this is totally bizarre.
Real quick update, Ben, on the escalator and teleprompter gate from the UN. So there was some speculation that UN, some heroic, almost sandwich throwing level UN staffer might have turned off the elevator when Trump was in it. It got him stuck in there. But now it says apparently the UN believes that someone from the president's party who was working, advancing him, inadvertently triggered the stop mechanism at the elevator. And this person at the UN also said that the White House was operating the teleprompter for Trump. Of course they were. So when he threatened to fire that person, he threatened to fire his own staff. But it's fun doing the show with you in real time and just updating. It's like one of those crazy days where there's too many press avails and events, and you're just kind of trying to drink from a fire hose, even on West Coast time.
Well, can I say one thing about this?
Yeah.
Because I wrote the speeches, right? And the teleprompter is wholly operated by the United States government, by the White House, communications office, and there is no UN piece there. I will tell you this because one time, Barack Obama made edits so late in the morning of the speech that I sent it to the teleprompter as he was walking on stage. He made the same kind of comment that Trump did, my speech isn't on the teleprompter. I'm watching on television, literally my stomach came into my mouth.
Yeah.
And he started reading it, and then all of a sudden the teleprompter came up. So I'm sure Trump will still blame the UN, but it's a kind of a metaphor for blaming the UN for your own fuck-ups, right? Like we were saying before, he's blaming the UN for its dysfunction when we're the reason it's dysfunctional. Now he's literally blaming the UN for our own teleprompter not working.
Yeah, it's also a bit, he's just he just blames everyone for everything. The guy sucks. Thanks for watching that excerpt, the Pod Save the World, the show I do each week with Ben Rhodes about the biggest issues happening in foreign policy and national security. Please subscribe to Pod Save the World if you don't mind, if you like this. It's very easy. It's free. Also, please subscribe to Pod Save America. We are trying to build a progressive media empire here. We are trying to be a counterweight to all the right-wing garbage that normal people who are searching for political news find on YouTube, because those are the biggest accounts, the TPUSAs, the Daily Wires, accounts like that. When you subscribe to Pod Save America here on YouTube, you help us surface good information into the algorithm and help people find factual information. So please do.